So, Sophie Kwasny, welcome to the podcast. Now, we've got a very interesting subject and an unexpected subject today, sport. The Council of Europe is known for human rights, democracy and justice. So how does sport fit in?
Well, precisely because we're working on human rights, democracy and justice. One of the best areas of our life is sport, to convey all of those values, the messages, the principles we're working on, because sport is touching each and every one of us. I don't know anyone who's not interested, passionate, some more than others, of course. But even if you don't practice, if you're not a supporter, at school you will be having some education to physical activity, and you will be following what's happening because it's in the media. So sport is a perfect vehicle for us, Council of Europe, to work on the values we're attached to.
So how did this come about? When did the Council of Europe decide to take up sport, and what's been the history in the background?
Well, quite early on, actually, when the Council of Europe started working specifically on culture issues with its European Cultural Convention, rapidly the governments and the authorities coming to Strasbourg on those issues, because they had a broader portfolio at national level, touching upon education matters, touching upon sport issues. Well, at that time, the Council of Europe started working on sports too. And I think one of the first topic, and it was in the 60s, so quite a while ago, late 60s, was to work on anti-doping, which emerged as a real threat to the whole integrity of the system. And so the first text we worked on, related to sport specifically, was dealing with anti-doping, late 60s.
So that makes a lot of sense, actually. I remember reading a book from the Council of Europe called Dying to Win,
Yes.
Dying to Win. And this really pointed out something fundamental. If you're talking about human rights, you're talking about the human rights of sports people to be able to pursue their sport in a safe way, and of course also this idea of fair play and equality in sport. So I suppose it would make total sense that anti-doping became the first thing that the Council of Europe dealt with.
I think it was one of the, emerging and strong issues each of our societies nationally starting being confronted with. You can imagine also the health policy related issues you have. So it's not solely about ensuring that you maintain this ethical guidance of sport, which is about the fair play you've just mentioned, but also ensure that precisely the athletes are protected. That if you want to keep the magic of the sport, you also need to maintain the fact that it's not tricked, it's not fixed, and that there is no privileged competitor in front of others. So rapidly, yes, those issues have been examined. We've been trying to provide guidance, and as you said, it's not solely focusing on the system itself, but really the impact on the persons. And you mentioned the right of those that are competing. It's a matter of having a fair access to sport, but it's also then, if you see the evolution in the time of this work, and to come back where we started about justice, it's also how do you ensure that for really high-level athletes, you ensure that their rights and the rights, for instance, to a fair trial are respected in a sport environment. How do you ensure that? So, I mean, the variety of topics you work on in a sport-related context are immense, and it's just fascinating.
So really it's applying all the values of the Council of Europe to a specific area. And I believe that the Council of Europe also works with the World Anti-Doping Agency. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. The World Anti-Doping Agency is really the global regulator at world level, and it's structured through a system of representation of regions, and of course for the European region in the World Anti-Doping Agency, the role of the Council of Europe is essential and has always been. What is quite interesting with the World Anti-Doping Agency is the way it's governed. You have half the sport movement, that makes the decision and finances, and half the public authorities, the governments. And so us, the Council of Europe, we ensure that the European governments they set similar directions, and then we go and put forward this European vision in the World Anti-Doping Agency. So this is about governance, of course, but it has very concrete impact. You know, when you negotiate the provisions of the code that then is applied in each of the countries by the anti-doping agencies. There again, our European identity, our Council of Europe values figure very prominently in the work we are trying to achieve and lead in the World Anti-Doping Agency.
Moving on a little bit, I remember in the 1980s what a lot of problems there were in stadiums, football stadiums specifically. I well remember the Heysel Stadium disaster, Hillsborough, and just in recent weeks we've also seen some problems in the Paris match. So the council got involved at that point, I believe, and brought in a whole new raft of ways of looking after people's health and safety in stadia. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I think this work you're referring to, which dates back to 1985 and precisely to the drama of the Heysel, was one of the fastest lawmaking in the Council of Europe. In 6 months, because of the atrocity of what had happened, because once again, sport is about passion, is about emotion, and is about enjoying and having, such a moment of fraternity together. Seeing those images and those deaths, immediately there was a very strong reaction, of course, from the public, but also from the governments responsible for it. And they decided that they needed to give the means from a law enforcement and a police angle to protect the supporters and the participants to those big sports events. And the Council of Europe, because that's what we're there to do, to guide the legislators. So we had a convention adopted on spectator violence, which evolved as also, you mentioned other cases. I can mention from a French perspective, the catastrophe of Furiani, which was not about the behavior of the supporters and their violence, but an issue of infrastructure. Welcoming those tens of thousands of participants is also an issue. So we see that this topic, which started focusing on the violence of spectators, evolved to broader security, infrastructure security, but also service aspects to make sure that those huge stadiums can ensure that you are welcomed, that the community around the stadia is not disturbed too much by the tens of thousands of supporters that come. And so we have now, very recently, 5 years ago, come up with a new instrument that marks the evolution of the field, and we now speak about a really integrated approach to those aspects of safety, security, and service. So you need to work on each and all of those topics, not solely on the ensuring that you have the police and the law enforcement that will make its job. And indeed, you refer to recent problems and incidents. So the only thing I can say is that we still have quite some work to do in that respect. The issue there, one of the issues, okay, you have the lack of staff, but you also have, and that's a new topic, the volume of fake tickets and what this led to. So we constantly have to face new challenges, address them, and provide guidance on those topics.
So a constantly evolving situation. And by an instrument, the Council of Europe means a legal text that brings people together. So this means that all the Council of Europe countries, or many of them, are behind your the different aspects of your work. What intrigues me is, how do you make sure that the recommendations, the standards you set, are followed?
Good question. So already there is a technical side to it, which is the nature of this legal instrument you're referring to. we work with conventions, so it's treaties and it's legally binding. And there, the countries, they commit to it. So already from the start, there is a very strong weight attached to the instruments. Then we worked on soft law instruments, like recommendations, for instance, or guidelines, that have more an inspirational nature to bring some changes in a smoother manner. The issue really of compliance, because that's what it is for our treaties, for which the countries have committed to, can be tricky. So what we are doing is accompanying the countries in ensuring their compliance, and we have what are called monitoring bodies. And so it's, if you want, it's peers examining what is done and reporting on some of maybe the shortcomings in a particular country, but always with the supportive vision of trying to enhance the capacities and the legal system of the country, and not necessarily to come and sanction for the shortcomings.
So I want to turn to another subject now, which is that of equality and diversity in sport. And I know this is something that's very close to the Council of Europe's heart. The equality, obviously, between men and women, diversity in terms of anybody being able to join in sport. But also I'm thinking of ways of protecting people in sport. For instance, there's been many scandals recently of sexual abuse of young people and children. And I believe all those areas are where the Council of Europe is now putting some of its emphasis.
Yes, absolutely. And again, with this human rights DNA, protecting the individuals, protecting their rights, the fight against discrimination is something we've always done. It's highly relevant also in a sport context. You mentioned the question of gender equality, which are striking, and despite the fact that there's been a number of efforts for years, the situation is still absolutely not balanced. So we still have to work, and at all levels, because it's in really the managerial level of the sport organizations, at the level of the practice, at the level of the financial retributions for the winning a competition, on media representation and coverage of sports issues. So throughout all those aspects, we are working. We have projects. We're engaging with countries and with our partners. That is also the sport organizations. Discrimination is also, unfortunately, perpetrated under other grounds. We have a lot of racism, xenophobia, homophobia. The whole list is present in sport. We've just launched actually a project on combating hate speech in sport, because that's also an interesting, while regrettable side of the new shift of hate speech online, and how the attacks that are done, of course, to athletes that are visible publicly is really something we have to combat, and behind work on the education from the youngest age. I could also, of course, mention the question of inclusions of disabled people, because it is also something which is still where there is still room for improvement. When we see, and this year we had for the Winter Olympics and Paralympics quite some achievements. We need to have more of our Paralympic athletes, engaging and being able to perform. So, indeed, this is because it's very close to the core of the activities of the Council of Europe. Is also something we're working on. And your last point of your question was about sexual abuse, protecting children. I think weeks ago it was in Canada that there were huge scandals in various disciplines. We've had it throughout our countries. There is a liberation of speech, so those cases start being reported. And we have great initiatives in this area where we also rely on survivors of those abuses and their testimonies and how to break away from that. But what we also see is that there is the issue of sexual violence, but you have also broader forms of abuse and neglect of children in sport that we have to combat. So this is indeed also one of our priorities. So another important topic that we're working on. And if I may, because I mentioned Canada, I think it's also an important point to make, because we think Council of Europe, European standards, but for a number of fields, our work goes really beyond our European borders, and it's the case in sport. When we engaged, to come back, for instance, to the anti-doping, when we engaged in WADA, we are there with the other regions. When we have conventions that aim at developing the national legislation, be it safety, security and service at sports events or anti-doping or match fixing, those legal tools are also open for countries outside Europe to use and to really inspire their legal system. So that's something we're also very keen on doing, is going beyond Europe on those topics.
So the Council of Europe setting worldwide standards there. You've already taken us a long journey through what the Council of Europe is doing, but I'm just wondering if you can see any trends for the future that might be important for us to look out for.
Trends. We have the prism of the Council of Europe focus. So that's, for instance, what we are putting on the agenda of our ministerial conference for the ministers responsible for sport that we're organizing this year, which will be the roadmap for the coming years. And there again, you of course come back to those questions of inclusion. If we look at the war that is going on now, not far from us, and the mass of displacement of people that it led to, and refugees, the question of integration of refugees and migrants through sport is again very prominent, and it's great because sport is such a fantastic tool of inclusion precisely. So this is something we'll be working on. But then obviously a matter which is of great concern to all of us globally, again, the sustainability issues. And so ensuring that not only our practice of sport, but also how sport can contribute to reducing the carbon footprint is something that is of high importance, I think, for the future.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for a fascinating walk through the Council of Europe's work on sport. Best of luck for the future.
Thank you, Cathie.